What if the tide of war could turn in a matter of days? This summer, Vladimir Putin believed he had secured victory, deploying 111,000 troops to seize the pivotal city of Prosovk. He envisioned a swift conquest leading to the fall of Donetsk and beyond, but reality painted a different picture. Instead of Russia's anticipated triumph, Ukraine unleashed a counteroffensive that not only thwarted the Russian advance but reclaimed more territory than ever before. The once hopeful Prosovk has transformed into a deadly quagmire for Russian forces, with its fate hanging by a thread. On September 7, Alexander Syrsky, the commander-in-chief of Ukraine's armed forces, shared compelling statistics on social media that highlighted Russia's staggering failures in Prosovk. Despite overwhelming numbers, Ukraine's forces have made significant territorial gains, even as Russia escalates its attacks. The situation on the Prosovk front remains dire, with Ukrainian units successfully repelling around 350 enemy assaults just last week. This area has become the focal point of Russia's offensive operations, where they attempt to breach Ukrainian defenses. However, the nature of the conflict has evolved. Reports indicate that many of Russia's recent attacks are now executed by smaller, stealthy units, a stark contrast to their previous tactics of overwhelming assaults with massive deployments of soldiers and armored vehicles. In July, Russian strategies shifted to using infiltrators and saboteurs, aiming to capture territory with greater stealth. This has posed new challenges for Ukraine, particularly in the strategically significant region of Pokrovsk. In response, Ukraine has fortified its defenses in Pokrovsk, adapting old strategies to counter the new threats posed by these smaller, drone-backed enemy units. So far, the Ukrainian strategy seems effective. Despite losing 5 square kilometers in August, defense forces have successfully regained control over 26 kilometers of their territory. This turnaround marks a significant blow to Putin's ambitious summer offensive, which aimed for a decisive victory in Prosovk. Instead of the anticipated gains, Russia has suffered a staggering loss of territory, 5 times greater than what they had captured. As the summer offensive faltered, Russia's hopes of claiming safe ground crumbled. With every Russian gain, a swift Ukrainian counterattack has reclaimed lost land, leading to unprecedented success for Ukraine at a time when Russia has committed more soldiers than ever to the region. The tide has shifted unexpectedly, and Ukraine's resilience has proven to be a formidable challenge to Russian aspirations. Meanwhile, in other regions like Karelia, reports suggest Ukraine is achieving similar victories against Russian forces. Though details are sparse, the momentum appears to favor Ukraine, with Syrsky stating that they have reversed many of Russia's gains. Even in locations where Russia previously made advances, such as Karelia, signs indicate that any ground gained has been lost once more, with Ukraine reclaiming territory with a vengeance. This remarkable turnaround in the conflict has transformed the narrative of the war. Rather than merely defending their land, Ukraine has taken the initiative, turning the Prosovk region into a lethal trap for Russian forces. The scale of Russian losses has been staggering, with over 291,000 soldiers reportedly killed or wounded during the summer offensive. The math is staggering. Putin's troops have suffered catastrophic losses while failing to achieve their objectives. Putin's grand strategy, designed to showcase an overwhelming Russian victory, has instead unraveled spectacularly. The offensive was meant to signal Russia's dominance, yet it has only highlighted their failures. As the situation unfolds, the consequences of this miscalculation will echo through the corridors of power in Moscow, leaving a path of destruction and a new chapter in the ongoing conflict. How will this turn of events reshape the future for both nations? The answers lie ahead in this gripping saga of resilience, strategy, and unexpected outcomes. Earlier, we saw how Russia shifted tactics, dropping massive assaults for stealthy, smaller groups trying to sneak forward in Pokrovsk. Ukraine quickly adapted. The fortifications there, once designed for brute force battles, were revamped to counter these cunning small units, some supported by drones. It's like turning a fortress built for giants into a trap for shadows. Ukrainian soldiers hold their ground with fierce determination. They dismantle enemy teams and equipment while launching daring counterstrikes. Despite losing 5 square kilometers in August, Ukrainian forces reclaimed a staggering 26 square kilometers. On September 7, Commander Alexander Sisky revealed the brutal truth: Putin's big summer offensive didn't just falter, it spectacularly failed. Prosovsk remains in Ukrainian hands, and Russia has surrendered 5 times more land than it gained. Every Russian advance meets a fierce Ukrainian pushback. Territory once thought untouchable by Ukraine is now slipping back under Ukrainian control, even as Russia pours unprecedented numbers of soldiers into the region. This turnaround was unexpected, shaking the plans Moscow had laid out months ago. The guns of summer haven't silenced Ukraine's resolve, instead, they ignite a fierce resurgence. But this extraordinary success in Pokrovsk isn't alone. Reports from Kiev Independent show similar stories near Derelia. Exact figures are scarce, but Sisky confirms Ukraine has more than undone Russian advances there. Russia's August push into Pilia, driven by infiltration tactics and maybe exploiting Ukraine's focus on Prosovsk, briefly gained ground. Yet this window of success was short-lived. If Sisky's numbers hold, all that ground is back in Ukrainian hands, and then some. How could Russia's massive summer operation, armed with elite troops and heavy equipment, crumble so quickly? What does this mean for the fate of Prosovsk and the broader conflict? The next chapter reveals the Ukrainian strategy behind this stunning reversal, and the shadow it casts over Moscow's entire campaign. Previously, we saw that Ukraine had not only halted Russia's advances but had pushed back fiercely, reclaiming lost ground in key regions. The Kiev Independent reported that despite a bold Russian thrust into Pilia during August, this advance was short-lived, largely because Ukraine's focus was fixed on retaking territory near Prosovsk. Now, Russia's attempt to use infiltration tactics into Pilia has collapsed. According to Ukrainian commander Alexander Sisky, all territory gained by Russia there in August has been reclaimed, and then some. This is no small detail. For much of this conflict, Russia seemed to be slowly grinding down Ukraine, seizing small areas bit by bit. Ukraine's counterattacks were limited, mostly defensive, and territorial gains tended to favor Russia. But now, everything has changed. The battle for Prosovsk and Pilia marks a dramatic shift. Rather than merely holding the line, Ukraine has launched a powerful counteroffensive against Russia's summer push. In doing so, they have transformed Prosovsk and its neighboring zones into a deadly trap for Russian forces. Let's remember, Putin had committed a staggering 111,000 soldiers to the fight around Prosovsk by late spring. On top of that, he sent 50,000 more into Sumy. His grand plan was clear: Prosovsk was supposed to fall swiftly. Sumy, perhaps less so, but Putin counted on capturing enough land there to form a buffer zone deep inside Ukraine. This defensive belt would stop Ukraine from launching any further counterattacks toward Kursk, Russia's border region, and shield Putin's regime from another disastrous invasion like the one Ukraine launched in August 2024. Instead, Russia met with catastrophe. The offensive has turned into a bloodbath on an unprecedented scale. The losses have been staggering, with hundreds of thousands of Russian soldiers killed or wounded. The soil of these regions is soaked with the cost of failure. What was meant to be a decisive summer campaign ended up exposing Russia's vulnerabilities and turning the tide. But what exactly went wrong for Russia? Was it hubris, flawed strategy, or something even deeper? The answers lie buried in the shattered hopes of that offensive, and in the fierce resilience of those defending their homeland. The next chapter will reveal how Ukraine's unexpected tactics shattered Russia's plans and why the battle for Prosovsk could become a turning point in the war. What new horrors await the forces trapped in this deadly trap? The fate of the region hangs in the balance. Earlier, we saw how Russia's plan to build a protective buffer inside Ukraine was meant to stop Ukraine from launching new attacks on Kursk. This was supposed to shield the Russian border region and save face for Putin after the intense clashes in August 2024. But instead of safety, what Russia found was devastating losses on a staggering scale. Information from Ukrinform revealed a shocking truth: Russia's summer offensive didn't just falter, it's believed to have cost Russia over 291,000 soldiers. Wait, how is that possible? Putin sent 110,000 troops to Prosovk and 50,000 to Sumy. That adds up to 170,000 soldiers. So, where did the extra losses come from? The answer lies hidden in the fierce fighting already raging in the Pokrovsk and other regions. Russia wasn't just losing soldiers on these two key fronts, they were bleeding everywhere. Ukraine's general staff took to social media to publicly invalidate claims made by Russian General Valery Gerasimov. He insisted that the summer offensive was a success, boasting about security zones Russia had allegedly created inside Ukraine. But this turned out to be a blatant lie. Not a single major city fell under full Russian control. Instead, Russia has faced continuous and hopeless battles in Kharkiv, Luhansk, and Donetsk regions throughout the year. The human cost is staggering. From these struggles, Russia lost nearly 210,000 soldiers killed or wounded. Their destruction of military hardware is equally catastrophic. More than 2,000 armored fighting vehicles, over 1,200 tanks, 700 artillery systems, and 157 multiple rocket launchers, all ruined or damaged. These numbers aren't just high. They are jaw-dropping. The loss rate is extraordinary, painting a grim picture of Russia's crumbling military might. If these losses started piling up from March, which some experts believe marks the beginning of the summer offensive, Russia has been losing around 52,000 soldiers every month. Other reports from Kharkiv-based outlets like Gwara Media present slightly different details. According to sources like The Economist, Russia lost 31,000 soldiers in just May and June alone. These are battle deaths, and don't even count the wounded. Could Putin's forces endure such a bloody toll? This grim arithmetic shows a deeply flawed campaign, one that's costing Russia far more than it gains. With every step forward met by a crushing counterattack, the offensive is unraveling almost beyond repair. The real question is not whether Russia can keep pushing, but how long it can keep losing. What will come next from this deadly stalemate? In the previous part, we saw how devastating Russia's losses have been during its failed attempts to seize territory around Prosovk and Sumy, with estimates of tens of thousands of soldiers lost just over a few months. Now, let's dive deeper into what those figures truly mean, and why this disaster is far worse than military defeats alone. Imagine losing 124 soldiers for every square kilometer barely gained. That's not just a war, it's a catastrophic bleed. These numbers come from combining shocking casualty reports with facts about territory reclaimed by Ukraine. Ukrainian forces have retaken 5 times more land in the Prosovk region than Russia captured. Every inch of battlefield gained by Moscow has been paid for with unimaginable human sacrifice, and, in many ways, it has been worthless. The Russian military is frantically trying to hold on to what's left, as commanders in Moscow desperately order more attacks on Prosovk. But 2025 hardly brought any relief. The official Ukrainian General Staff has openly accused Russia of inflating their claims. According to Ukrainian sources, Russia hasn't fully controlled any major city since the beginning of the year. The only numbers they can prove beyond doubt relate to Russia's crushing losses. Over 291,000 Russian soldiers have been killed or wounded, figures so huge they defy belief. The mass awarding of medals to 120,000 Russian troops only highlights a grim truth: these decorations attempt to mask staggering death tolls. What are these losses telling us? That the Russian government's narrative about a victorious summer offensive is a fabricated story. Putin's grand plan has collapsed under its own weight. The Atlantic Council described this failure bluntly on September 2. Putin's offensive wasn't just about capturing strategic land. It was a show of power intended to break the spirit of Ukraine and intimidate the West. He wanted to seize Prosovk and carve out a buffer in Sumy, creating an unshakable foothold inside Ukraine. Putin's vision was clear: we will take these regions, and this proves Russia's victory is inevitable. Those words were meant as a warning, to force Ukraine and its allies into a peace deal on Russia's terms. He even declared in March that Ukrainian military defeat was imminent. Did he truly believe this? Was it arrogance? Or was he misled by those around him, trapped in a cycle of false optimism? The reality shattered these ambitions. Instead of triumph, Russia found itself bleeding ever more deeply. Ukraine took the fight to a new level, turning what should have been a military success story for the Kremlin into a gory catastrophe, one that still echoes across the battlefield. What does the future hold, then? Can Russia recover from such precipitous losses, or is this the beginning of a permanent shift in the war's momentum? The answer remains tangled in uncertainty, but one thing is clear: the cost of this failed offensive will haunt Russia for years to come. In the previous section, we saw how Putin's grand plan, to crush Ukraine's military by summer's end, spiraled into a catastrophic defeat. Despite proclaiming victory and threatening to finish off Ukraine's forces, the Russian leader's confidence proved wildly misplaced. Russia's advances shrank to a mere fraction of a percent of Ukraine's land, while key strategic cities stayed firmly out of Moscow's grasp. Now, the question burning in everyone's minds: how did Ukraine flip the script so dramatically? How did it transform Russia's massive summer offensive into a disastrous failure that bled Russian forces dry while reclaiming vast territories? Putin's declarations weren't just empty boasts. Some believe he truly thought Russia's triumph was a done deal, maybe misled by advisors who echoed only what he wanted to hear. Others argue he knowingly spun falsehoods to bolster his image at home and abroad as peace talks loomed, painting a picture of unstoppable Russian might. But the harsh truth quickly surfaced: Russia's front lines stalled. No major city fell into their hands throughout the summer stretch. Gains were minimal and painfully costly. The Atlantic Council's analysis was clear and brutal: Russia's attempts to craft security zones inside Ukraine failed miserably. Instead, what emerged was a staggering human toll: tens of thousands of soldiers lost, equipment destroyed, and for what? Barely a handful of miles won. This failure has shaken international perceptions. The myth of an invincible Russian war machine is crumbling under Ukraine's resilience. With Ukraine reclaiming 5 times more land in the Eastern Front than Russia captured, while turning battlefields into lethal traps for Moscow's troops, the narrative is shifting. So why did Ukraine succeed where Russia stumbled? Early clues lie in Ukraine's swift adaptability. When Russia abandoned its old, overwhelming assaults for stealthier tactics, sending in smaller, infiltrating units supported by drones, Ukraine responded with a masterstroke, re-engineering its defenses to neutralize these new threats. Fortifications in key cities evolved overnight from static walls into dynamic strongholds, designed to detect and eliminate these covert attacks before they could wreak havoc. But there's more to the story. Ukraine's soldiers aren't just holding the line, they're pushing back aggressively, dismantling enemy forces and rolling up lost ground. While Russia lost 5 square kilometers in August, Ukraine reclaimed more than 26. This staggering turnaround reveals a battle of not just territory, but of will, strategy, and raw courage. As the smoke rises over Prosovk and beyond, a haunting question lingers: can Russia recover from this blood-soaked failure? Or has the tide definitively turned in Ukraine's favor? The clash for control is far from over, but one thing is clear: Putin's summer dream has become a nightmare for his forces. What will happen next? How will Ukraine's winning formula evolve? And how long can Russia sustain these devastating losses? These questions mark the edge of the battlefield, where every decision could shape the fate of a nation. What if Ukraine's strategy shifted from mere defense to a bold offensive? As the unbearable summer heat bore down on the battlefield, a remarkable transformation took place. Ukraine, long entrenched in a defensive posture against Russia's relentless advances, made a bold choice. The resilience of Ukrainian forces soared as they realized that the drastic change in Russian tactics, smaller, more agile units, offered new opportunities. Could they seize this chance and redefine the war's narrative? In August, while Russia maintained its belief in a sweeping victory, Ukraine turned the tide. The shift was palpable. Ukrainian leaders recognized that the smaller Russian units, lacking the ability to fortify their positions like their larger predecessors, were ripe for counterattacks. And so, they initiated a series of unexpected strikes. The newly formed assault forces, officially established on August 18, surged ahead, revitalizing defenses across the front. These units did not just hold the line, they pressed forward. On August 20, Ukraine's strategic brilliance shone through. Reports emerged indicating that Ukrainian assault troops had successfully intercepted a Russian infiltration squad attempting to breach defenses near Makrovsk. This wasn't just a tactical victory, it marked a vital lifeline for Doilia, restoring hope to its citizens. Within days, Ukrainian forces reclaimed control of crucial villages like Mikhalka, Pakivka, and Vadimirivka, their flags fluttering in a breeze that whispered tales of resilience and defiance. Russia, once confident in their grip on these territories, found themselves beleaguered. As the tides of war shifted, the reality became clear: the Ukrainians were not merely holding their ground. They were reclaiming lost territories with newfound fervor, overcoming Russian numbers of approximately 1,000 to 2,000 dedicated soldiers. So, could this relentless spirit from Ukraine turn the conflict entirely on its head? As questions lingered in the air, the impact of these cunning maneuvers became undeniable. Ukraine's forces were not just responding, they were leading, carving out victories where darkness once prevailed. The stage was set for even more surprises ahead. What could happen next? The wait for more extraordinary transformations had just begun. Russia's grand summer assault in the region of Prosovk was supposed to be an unstoppable wave sweeping across Ukraine's defenses. Vladimir Putin had poured in 111,000 soldiers, convinced that capturing this city would pave the way for taking Donetsk and beyond. But the reality on the ground turned into a brutal nightmare for the invaders, as Ukraine not only stalled the offensive but turned the battlefield into a deadly trap. In the previous part, we saw Russian forces lose control over dozens of villages they had held only a week earlier. Ukrainian counterattacks reclaimed Mikhalka, Pakivka, and Vadimirivka, shattering what was left of Russia's front line. What followed was a desperate scramble as Moscow's troops struggled to hold on to a broken salient, losing more ground than they gained. Now, David Axe reveals a crucial piece of this puzzle. Ukraine's counteroffensive was powered by a corps of seasoned fighters, veterans from the invasion of Kursk. 4 to 5 brigades, each about 2,000 soldiers strong, were kept in reserve until the perfect moment. When unleashed near Bryansk, these battle-hardened units turned the tide. Slowly but surely, they pushed forward to the last fortified towns and trench lines just 5 or 6 miles outside Bryansk, cutting off vital Russian supply routes. Imagine the tension, the sound of artillery fire echoing across the fields, dust swirling in the wind, as Ukrainian soldiers hold firm under relentless pressure. These reserves arrived just in time to choke Russia's momentum, halting what was supposed to be a decisive push. But when the tide turns against you, what options remain? Faced with failure, Russia's tactics took a dark and desperate turn. On September 5, an eye-opening interview with Ukrainian spokesman Stanislav Bunyatov revealed a shocking truth. Russian troops were now infiltrating Ukrainian towns disguised as civilians. Their mission? To raise Russian flags in places like Kupiansk, not as a real victory, but as pure theater. These flag-raising soldiers were quickly eliminated, but the incident exposes a deeper strategy from Moscow. Putin refuses to admit defeat. Instead, he tries to manufacture success by creating illusions, fake gains meant to convince the world that Russia is still conquering ground. Classic hybrid warfare, a tactic refined by General Gerasimov himself, where the real battle is fought alongside propaganda wars. Bunyatov's question hangs in the air: what else can Russia do at this point? The spring-summer offensive is over, and Russia failed to achieve a single strategic objective. The soldiers on the ground know the truth: the losses are staggering, the advance is hollow. As the dust settles, the real battle shifts beyond just land and soldiers. It's a fight for perception. Who controls the narrative? Who shapes reality? And as the front line burns, one question remains: how long can Moscow keep spinning this web of lies before the facade crumbles completely? The stunning summer offensive in Pekro has collapsed into little more than a smokescreen. President Putin's grand plan to crush Ukrainian resistance and seize control has backfired so badly that Russia lost more ground than it claimed. The vivid image of Russian flag wavers marching through captured towns is a carefully crafted illusion. These superficial displays cloak a harsh truth: Ukraine holds the real power on the ground, and the supposed Russian gains are thin shadows of reality. So, is all hope lost for Russia to capture Povsk? The summer campaign might be over, but claiming defeat? Not yet. Despite Ukraine turning Povsk and its surroundings into a deadly labyrinth for Russian forces, Putin's ambitions remain unbroken. According to Ukrainian military sources cited by the Kiev Independent, Russia is quietly rallying forces for a fresh assault, a relentless effort to break through defenses and claw back what slipped away. By early September, Russian troops were reported pushing to secure new strategic positions around Povsk. They're creating gray zones, areas where neither Russia nor Ukraine truly controls the ground. The arrival of experienced naval infantry and air assault units signals a sharpened approach compared to the scattered small unit infiltrations seen earlier. The stakes have risen, Russia's attacks have become more intense, more dangerous. Ukraine, meanwhile, is locked into fierce battles, fending off hundreds of enemy assaults weekly with fierce determination. This is not what the world expected when Putin boasted that Russia's foe was on the ropes, ripe for victory. The summer debacle exposed just how wrong those claims were. But even as Russia prepares its next move, Ukraine remains poised and battle-hardened, ready to resist any onslaught. Yet the deciding battle may hinge on the fate of nearby Doilia. Defense experts suggest this hotspot could tip the scales in the struggle over Povsk. Russian troop movements indicate they see this region as critical, hinting at a new phase of fighting, one that may determine control of the entire area. Behind the scenes, the war is evolving in brutal ways. The deafening roar of artillery, the acrid smoke hanging over shattered villages, and the tense silence before a fresh assault all paint a vivid sensory portrait of this deadly chess match. Which side will seize the advantage? Will Russia's renewed push finally crack Ukraine's defenses, or will Ukraine's resilience turn these attempts into yet more costly failures for Moscow? The summer offensive's failure was meant to be a secret. Instead, the truth screams from the front line: Russia's grand design has faltered. But the story is far from over, and the next chapter promises even greater surprises. Instead of securing Prasovsk and advancing deeper into Ukraine, Russian forces found themselves bogged down, facing significant losses. But this struggle was not limited to Prasovsk. Reports indicated that Ukrainian forces were achieving similar victories in the region of Dorelia, indicating a broader trend of reclaiming lost territory. However, such advancements came at a significant cost, with Russian casualties escalating into the hundreds of thousands during this ill-fated push. As the battle raged, a critical question emerged: would Russia manage to salvage its ambitions in the face of unexpected Ukrainian resilience? And as for Ukraine, its fight wasn't merely about land, but about preserving heritage and identity against an aggressor intent on rewriting history. Concerns were also raised in the intelligence community regarding Russia's tactics, as they adapted their approach to smaller units and infiltration strategies. They aimed to exploit weaknesses but instead triggered an urgent response from the Ukrainian command, leading to fortified defenses that thwarted Russian advances. A glimmer of uncertainty loomed large. If the Russians were forced to retreat from their newly claimed positions, what next move would they make? As the dust settled from this intense conflict, one truth remained: Ukraine would continue to embrace its fight for freedom, refusing to cede any territory, a sentiment emphatically expressed by President Zelensky during interviews affirming that what lay at stake was not just meticulously mapped borders but the very soul of a nation. As the battlefield of Prasovsk holds its breath, the stakes are higher than ever, echoing a solemn reminder that the fight for identity is ever present amidst the chaos of war. Will Ukraine continue to outmaneuver its opponent, or will Russia finally tilt the scales in their favor? Only time would reveal the outcome of this fierce struggle for survival. In the heart of the unfolding conflict, Ukraine stands resilient, defending its cherished land against encroaching threats. The anticipated fall of Prasovsk, a city once thought to be easily claimed by Russia, now hangs delicately in the balance. Should it eventually succumb, the price for Russia could be staggering, a deployment of countless soldiers with no promise of victory. The Ukrainian forces are intent on preserving their heritage, standing firm against overwhelming odds. They vow to protect every inch of their territory, even if it means sacrificing thousands of adversaries. Yet, should the city fall, Ukraine has strategies prepared to fortify other regions, continuing the fight unyieldingly. This looming uncertainty is a growing concern for Russian leadership, as this summer's offensive transformed Prosovsk into a quagmire of destruction for Russian dreams of conquest. Can Ukraine replicate this strategy in other regions if Russia pushes further? As they brace for potential advances, Russia may soon face the harsh reality of a dwindling tank brigade. The heavy artillery, once pivotal to their strategy, is now becoming a relic of the past. Yet, what causes this decline? It is a chilling truth both sides must face, one linked to innovative weaponry that Ukraine has successfully deployed across various battlefronts. What secrets lie in wait as the clash for control intensifies? Prepare to be riveted by the unexpected twists that are sure to unfold in this relentless struggle for survival.